Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Reed Young, and we're back with some more Zoom poker action here. I will post a little link for you guys who haven't seen episode 1, but what we're doing is playing a six-handed cash game on a Zoom poker table, which is a speed game, so you can quick fold, you can make a lot of decisions really quickly, get a lot of hands per hour, so it's an awesome way to increase your winnings. What we're looking at doing is, because you get in situations where you have new tables all the time, is we want to learn how to exploit regular players here. So on the left hand side, we kind of consider a bet briefly. I think checking is fine as well. Really what you're asking yourself is this guy going to fold a 2 or a 5 if I bet twice? If that's the case, then I think betting twice is fine. Otherwise, we do have a little bit of showdown value, and we might be able to induce some bluffs with our ace high. That doesn't mean that we have to check call the turn and the river with ace high. So if you think about it, we're going to be check calling the turn with some portion of our hands, and then we're going to be check calling the river if our opponent bets again, whatever the river is. Let's say maybe it's a queen. We'll check call the river with some portion of our hands again, and it's likely that we'll have something maybe like King 6 suited that we'd rather check call than ace 4. So we'll be folding the ace 4 on the river. And so if you guys are kind of apprehensive about check calling multiple streets with a hand, you can think of it that way. This could be a river where leading as a bluff might potentially have a bit more value than checking, because if you think about what hands he's going to be bluffing with on the turn, I think pretty much all of them hit this river, unless he had some sort of random 10-9 that he's bluffing with. But even if that's the case, he might just fold if we lead and bluff if we don't lead. And if he bluffs, I think we're going to end up folding this pair of 4s. It's about one of the worst hands that we can have at this point with how connected the board is. And also, it's very difficult for us to get value from a straight if we do check to him. So in other words, if he is value betting even something like Queen 7 that he gave up with on the flop and just turned to 7, he might just check it back on this river. So I think leading in general from the big blind here is a pretty convincing strategy, and that's just such a large bet given how strong his hand range is. I think it's a very easy fold with ace 4. Really all you would be looking to do is snap off some random overcards, which you could certainly have. So it kind of depends how the player is playing, but not exactly the best turn for the button just to start firing at with random air, and you can take that into account as you're kind of figuring out what to do. Those spots are pretty interesting. I think a lot of people misplay like these small hands, and they add up to be pretty significant. So definitely remember to fight for those small pots too, because a lot of people just don't care about them. Like, oh, it's 5 big blinds, no big deal. But if you win one of those every 20 hands that you wouldn't have, all of a sudden you're crushing the world. So keep an eye out and look to improve in those nuanced small spots and those hands that don't matter, because everyone gets dealt pocket kings and everyone gets them all in preflop in about every case. So even though it's exciting to watch, it's not where your money's made. Yeah, so anyway, kind of digressing a bit while pausing the video here, but the 8-7 suited I think is a great time to re-raise as a bluff, and it's a pretty good hand to use, because if you're called preflop, then you don't have to worry about domination, and really your value range from this position should almost be pocket aces if you're against a good opponent. And that sounds kind of ridiculous, like very tight. Like, why wouldn't I re-raise kings here, or queens even? Sometimes you certainly can, again, against a looser opponent. But against someone who's going to 4-bet you with a balanced range, you're just not going to be happy getting even really kings all in pre-flop, 100 big blinds effective. So, there's a lot of math that goes into that. It's something we'll post on our training site once we launch. But I guess that's some general advice for you guys from now. And I'm happy to see that my friend here did opt for the re-raise bluff. Maybe a bit large of a re-raise. I don't think there's that much need to really just blast the pot with money. Um, Anytime you're kind of worried about bluffing and making it look credible, just think about how the range of hands that you're using is constructed, rather than your bet size necessarily. So in other words, you don't need to put in so many big blinds pre-flop in order to represent strength. You can allow your range to represent the strength. So in other words, if we only have pocket aces and then a handful of suited connectors here pre-flop, it almost doesn't matter what size we make it as long as the proportion of suited connectors that we use to pocket aces is correct. So our opponent can be put into a tough decision if he has a hand like pocket tens, and we have 8-7 suited some of the time, and we have aces, which obviously crush pocket tens some of the time. So that's the idea, rather than saying, hey, here's $1 million, now I have aces. The idea is to put your opponent into a difficult decision the times that he has medium strength hands, to the point that we can get value from our aces, and he's indifferent to calling or folding because we're bluffing often enough as well. So that way you either make money with your bluffs if he folds too often, or you make money the times he calls you down with pocket tens because you have aces often enough. So kind of a long-winded, very simple explanation to a very complex idea, but hopefully it gives you guys some food for thought at least there. On this turn, you can double barrel certainly some of the time. I mean, of course you want to. If you think about our range in general for value here, I think this would be an okay spot to double barrel. Again, if our value range preflop is only pocket aces, we're only representing 3 combinations of aces, so we don't need to barrel that often. And in all likelihood, if we got called on the flop, our opponent probably has an ace himself. So when you're thinking about the number of combinations you're representing, it may not actually be 3 here. It's 3 times some function of frequency that your opponent has an ace also. So in other words, sometimes our opponent's going to have ace-queen suited here, and if we only have pocket aces for value, instead of representing 3 combinations for value, now we're representing 1 combination for value. So that's another crazy spot that makes math go absolutely berserk when you're trying to analyze Hold'em. On the left, we re-raised pocket queens. Not really much to talk about there. I think the sizing and it looks like the bet sizing on the flop and everything are just fine. Great board to bet. On this turn, it doesn't really make that many hands that our opponent could have unless he just floated us with 7-5 suited on the flop, which is reasonable, but it's, you know, a few of a much wider range of hands that he can have that are going to pay us off. So I think the standard play here is to bet with the intention of value betting all in on most rivers. I would probably bet larger too, yeah, like 750 or so, somewhere in that ballpark, because again, we're trying to make our opponent indifferent to calling or folding. Oh, sorry about this, guys. Yeah, let me see if I can get us back here. Misclick. Okay, so we bet and then we get jammed on, and if you guys kind of saw it there before I misclicked away from the screen, our opponent, or I'm sorry, our player who's playing this Zoom table called instantaneously, which I think is a huge mistake. Yes, we have a very good hand for our range. Yes, our opponent can connect with the board a lot, but if you think about it, like how many people at 25 no limit are jamming a hand like 6-5 here as a semi-bluff? Not many. I mean, probably none. So if that's the case, we're looking at a value hand, a pure value hand, not some sort of like ace-3 of clubs, not some sort of 6-5 pair in a straight draw. It's going to be something that's better than queens. And if that's the case, we need to see how many of those hands are two pair and how many of those are sets and better against which we have pretty much no equity. Without, maybe about 80% of them being two pair, we don't have the pot odds to call. And I think that's a pretty reasonable assumption. So kind of surprising that he shows up with kings here to take that line. Sort of like a weird protection-y value all in on the turn. I don't mind it. It kind of avoids him playing confusing rivers some of the time. On the other hand, if he does have a hand like 6-5 and he's moving all in with kings here, then you better be ready for some tough river decisions, because we're going to be able to value bet our queens extremely effectively, knowing that he plays strong hands this way. So if you ever see an opponent going all in on the turn with strong hands like this, a lot of the time it means you're going to be able to play rivers extremely easily against them, and you're going to be able to make very tight bet folds on the turn, like I'm kind of advocating for with these queens. Obviously hindsight's 20/20, but I think the rationale behind bet folding the queens against this player in this game holds up quite well. So something to consider for you guys as you kind of try to move up through limits. When you're moving up, obviously players are going to have bluffs where they have value bets in almost every spot, but that's one a lot of people just don't think about. And it's nice to see kind of the note taking as well, because that's something, especially in Zoom poker, a lot of people just kind of negate. They don't even use. I think a pretty clear call there with ace queen. You could re-raise for value depending on the opponent, given the stack size. So that's kind of a pretty big mistake this guy's making, is to make such a large open size and then just and have such a short stack, because if he gets re-raised, he's almost committed to either 4-betting or folding his entire range. So he has to be opening pre-flop pretty tightly. I wouldn't mind just betting on the flop, because I think you win much more often. And if you're not betting the flop, then I like this line. We're kind of assuming that he's playing, king-jack this way too much of the time. On the river, I think this is actually a very easy call given his flop line, because I would not expect such a short stack to check many hands with a 10 in them, because they're all pair plus straight draw or straights already. It doesn't make sense for him to check and slow play that much on such a connected board. What it does make sense for him to do is check and give up, because this board hits our range harder than it hits his. And also, if he is opening with that tight range like we talked about pre-flop, where he's making it such a large size with about 60 big blind stack, he's missing this board a lot more often. So he's making a mistake by opening too many hands pre-flop, or he's making a mistake by bluffing here too often. In all likelihood, we can get him to pay for one or the other by calling here. So I think it's an easy call, even though the board gets very dangerous. But sometimes when the board gets very dangerous, you kind of just know that people are bluffing out of proportion to their value bets. So we've kind of narrowed it down. I mean, unless he showed up with ace-5 of hearts or something weird there, I think we have the best hand a lot of the time. Certainly enough of the time to call, I would imagine. Yeah, I think not betting ace-10 there is fine. Not much to say about it, really. Having a heart in your hand is pretty awesome when the board has 3 hearts on it, and you do want some hands without hearts in them, just because if the turn's a heart, you want to be able to bluff. With king-queen here, it's a pretty good hand to re-raise as a bluff, because it blocks a lot of the pre-flop raiser's opening range. Ace-king, ace-queen, pocket kings, pocket queens, a lot of those are the majority of hands that someone's going to raise from under the gun. So it's a decent hand to bluff re-raise if you're not going to be calling with it pre-flop. And I think not calling with king-queen, only 100 big blinds effective, with so many people yet to act, is the correct play. So yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying this video series so far. Let me know in the comment section if there's anything else you'd like to see, or you'd like me to talk about that you see in Zoom games, or your regular shorthanded Hold'em games, and share it with a poker buddy. I'll see you guys next week, and I look forward to your comments. They were awesome last time, and we got a lot of cool stuff answered. So I will see you guys next time. Take care.